Welcome to this episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. My name is Adam. Liz, how are you today?
I'm really well, thanks, Adam. How are you?
Good, and happy to be diving into a bit of an essential oil classic today, aren't we?
Well, I reckon that I would say that this is an essential of the 20th century. I think that when I was studying, the world, the scientific world was fascinated with it, and it was in every clinical trial. Then it suddenly was in every supermarket shelf. And now I don't think people talk about it that much now. I don't think it kind of took itself into the 21st century the same way as it did in the 20th. What's your thought about tea tree?
Maybe we can do a little bit of a nudge for it today, because I guess it was a big one. It was it was probably, along with eucalyptus, Australia's two mainstays in that way. And as an Australian, we all know the smell of tea tree. Although saying what was found in the supermarket and the purity of that compared to what we, can use in aromatherapy is very, very different. And you want to be very dividing in that as well. I think it still definitely has its place. And hopefully today we can flesh out some of maybe the energetical properties, which I think often go remiss. They just go, oh, it's a cleaning and cleansing oil. So maybe we should see if we can resurrect the reputation of tea tree in our half-hour swoop.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, without doing too many spoilers, I can never really perceive any spiritual aspect at all with tea tree. And I know people write that a lot about eucalyptus. Now, I can with eucalyptus, but I can't with tea tree. But Mum wrote something really interesting in her Garden of Eden book that over the last few years has really kind of galvanised my thinking. So we'll get into that. But first of all, how do you use it for physical medicine?
Yeah, well, one thing I did want to point out as well is we should be really clear. Sometimes people use the terms tea tree and Melaleuca interchangeably. Now, yes, you can. I guess you can use them interchangeably, but Melaleuca is a whole family. So that is, there's, other oils like Neoli, Rosalina, Nerolina. They're all part of the Melaleuca family, and tea tree is one of those particular ones. For a little bit of history, if I can give you some Australian history, it doesn't grow all over Australia. It's on the east coast of Australia. And the indigenous Bundjalung people there would use it for a whole range of reasons. So they'd crush up the leaves and inhale it. They'd rub it on their skin for any skin issues. And they'd actually boil it in water. And then when Captain Cook actually came down and saw them boiling in water, that's where he gave it the name tea tree. So that's where that kind of comes from. So that's why we refer to that particular Melaleuca as tea tree. Now, I use it. I think its main property, probably, first of all, would be skin. And I think, for any skin complaint, when your skin's not happy, tea tree is a great one to go for. Is there any reason you would not use tea tree on the skin, Liz? I wanted to ask you that.
No. Next question.
Cool, done. Yep, if the skin's not happy, then pop it on. I think, it's been favourable for insect bites, cuts, wounds. It can be quite nice. People have found on eczema. It can be soothing sometimes for that as well. So I think, yeah, if your skin's not happy, get good old tea tree out in that way. Where I also use it, being an Australian oil, I do clean with it. So I'll just pop it on bench tops and wipe things down. But probably the most unique way that I used it, that I learned many years ago, is those that have followed me on social media have probably seen over the last 5 years or so the journey with my mouth and my teeth. So I used to have really quite bad teeth. I've gone through surgery and got braces and now, got my pearly whites. When I had really bad English teeth, my mother was English, my gums would always bleed all the time. And I thought I'd do whatever I could. Now, I used to live in a wine region. So the police were always out breathalyzing. And being really conscious of my oral health, I'd always brush my teeth and then I'd use good old mouthwash. And one day, got in the car, went around two corners, and at 2:00 in the afternoon, the police pulled me over and said, "When was the last time you had a drink?" I was like, 2 or 3 days ago. They're like, "You sure?" I'm like, "Yeah." They said, "Because you've blown over the limit of 0.05, which is the legal limit in Australia." Now, I could still taste the minty taste of that commercial mouthwash that I had in my mouth. And I said, "Does mouthwash impact those machines?" And he said, "Yeah. That would, that's probably it." And so if you learn nothing else from this episode, know that if you get pulled over drink driving, so that you use mouthwash, it might buy you some time. No. But what I did is I started looking then into mouthwash and going, okay, well, what's actually in this? And if you do some searching on the history of Listerine, it was originally created as a floor cleaner, and then it didn't clean floors very well. So they rebranded it and made it an anti-dandruff treatment. And then that didn't work too well. So then they turned it into a mouthwash. And although we spit it out, remember that we absorb things through the oral cavity and through the mouth. And there's been some scary findings with that. And so I actually wanted to stop, and I did stop using Listerine. This is where tea tree came in. I'd pop a couple of drops of tea tree, and you've got to be wary again of where you're getting your tea tree from. I probably wouldn't be doing this with supermarket tea tree. And I'd swish that around my mouth. And my gums that would always bleed, after a few weeks, stopped. And I've never had issues with that again. And so each day I'll still use a little bit of tea tree. And I've been really happy, and all the people that have worked on my mouth have been really happy with how quickly things heal from using tea tree in that way. So that's my kind of different way that I use tea tree.
That's a great story. I've got a friend who was tested for drugs when she joined the fire service, and she'd eaten poppy seed loaf and had to retest. She got turned away because she didn't poppy seed. But yeah, so my first comment about that is that's a tremendous way of using it. And if you look at like Ayurvedic medicine, what they do is they dilute it into carrier oil, and they kind of swoosh around the mouth, and it's more technical than that, but they call it oil pulling. Yes. Now, my only thing to say about that is, oh my God, it tastes horrible. How are you doing that every day? So I do use it. I'm quite prone to having abscesses there, and so I use tea tree, honey myrtle, spikenard, yarrow, and never have to go to the dentist for it. So it is fantastic for oral health, and also it's been quite well researched. I can never say the blooming constituent. Terpinol 4-ol. In my head, it's 4-terpinol. So terpinol 4-ol and carvacrol together are supposed to be like the magic blend for oral health, for gums, etc. So those of you who don't do much chemistry, carvacrol, we're looking at oregano, marjoram, that kind of thing. But again, that's going to taste horrible. So you're going to have to do some serious blending for that. I agree completely about what you say about skin, although for me, I probably, not because it's wrong, but because I can think of gentler oils, perhaps wouldn't put it onto tea tree unless it was infected. Because
for eczema, you mean?
Sorry, for eczema, yep. Yes. So for me, I would say infected, but like viral issues. Infections is what I use it for, and as an antiviral. And I always used to laugh. The way we had our course notes written out was there was just like the long list of properties, and I used to go antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial, antiseptic. You could go right across the gamut, and it was just like this daft list that, why am I saying all of those things, But anything where you look like there's going to be an infection, I would use tea tree. So specifically, I think probably the most important ones to know are the Staph aureus infection. So most of us have that bacteria in our body anyway, in our mouth and on our skin. And it's okay until it goes out of balance. And for a lot of people, that'll go out of balance in hospital because it sits very nicely on like catheters and things like that. So no matter how clean the hospital is, it finds its way in. So if somebody's got something like a cut on their leg that looks like it might go ulcerated, or where wounds can start to go septic, that's the Staph aureus job doing its job. So any kind of cuts and abrasions, I would always sort of wash around the outside with tea tree, and it breaks every law you're supposed to say. Of course, you're supposed to say that that you need to dilute it, and you do, because what if your skin reacts differently to mine, and you definitely can come sensitized to it. And if you find that it's one of those oils that you work really well with, what you don't want to do is get into a situation where you've sensitized yourself and you can't use it anymore. All of that said, I never do. I quite often use it neat on the skin, and particularly if like I've cat scratches, I always use tea tree on those. And if I get a thorn or get scratched in the garden pruning the roses, tea tree, and I would use galbanium to get it out, but tea tree on those kind of things. So all of that kind of skin stuff, but more I would use it for lungs, because of course lungs are my thing. So for example, again, Pseudomonas aerosa, I can't ever say it, it's too early in the morning. Pseudomonas aerosa, thank you, is the bug that causes, one of the bugs that causes pneumonia, for example. So anything where there is an infection in the lungs, it's great. And as well, most of you will say, oh, I was taught by my mum, and that is correct. I was taught by my mum to do aromatherapy, but also my stepdad was a tremendous aromatherapist, and he always taught people the best way to use tea tree is to inhale it from the bottle. If you've got like a lung, a sore throat or anything going on in the lungs, chesty stuff, to kind of put it in your mouth, but don't close your mouth around it. I haven't got any in front of me. And kind of go, so that you get it right down into your lungs, and it works really fast. And of course, that is really close to how it's used in the indigenous medicine. Before they had essential oils, they would burn the beautiful leaves on the fire, and you would gasp the smoke. And then when they learned to boil it in water and make a tea, again, gasp the fumes. And it is incredibly helpful for that. The other thing that's useful perhaps to know is it's very good for, there's quite a lot of research now into tea tree and eucalyptus for after you've had your COVID jab. So there's so many different side effects, isn't there? I mean, COVID's just like one of those things that has its gamut across so many different things. But they showed that like it brought your temperature down. It stopped with all the pain that you were getting in your body. Even the itching and soreness around the lump. All of those things were improved by having used tea tree or used eucalyptus. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute about why that is, because it's something called quorum sensing, but I want to talk about that in the spiritual aspect rather than that. But it's got like an anti-virulent aspect where it stops it spreading throughout the body too quickly and too aggressively. Oh yes, athlete's foot is the other thing.
Oh, very much so. Definitely, it would be absolutely great for that. Just one side note on the mouthwash. I'll sometimes just mix it with a drop of either peppermint or spearmint. But I always say, if you've ever been to a naturopath and you've had naturopathic herbs, you can handle anything after drinking that kind of stuff. So, a bit of tea tree.
I like things to taste beautiful.
Fair enough. We'll try a bit of spearmint. But I found it really interesting when you mentioned that you find a lot of people can't find the spiritual aspects of tea tree and eucalyptus. Obviously, they are both gifted from the southern hemisphere, and I wonder if that's because probably most of the people you're speaking to are northern hemisphere individuals. That maybe it's just that disconnection with the land. Because for me, I'm going to bang on for a long time about tea tree today, and eucalyptus I could do the same. And also interesting that these two come together when you were talking about with COVID and that, and every country had their way of handling COVID, but Australia the government obviously had something to do with that, but there has been some spiritual kind of discussion around, well, how come Australia fared pretty well? Was it the plants that were around and the air that they're breathing and that kind of thing? And, that I don't have any kind of evidence or well thrashed out theories on that, but there has been discussion about, wonder what the eucalyptus and the tea trees are to do with there. So I'd be really intrigued to know, you said you didn't know too much about the energetics of tea tree, but what was your mum kind of proposing about it?
I want to just speak to what you just said first.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
I do know that they did some really interesting work into 1,8 cineol, which is obviously eucalyptus, not tea tree, but they were able to show that 1,8 cineol actually stops the virus, the SARS-2 virus, being able to actually penetrate into the cells. Because it uses like a spike on the ACE2 protein, which is what is blood pressure, blood volume. So get it right, the 1,8 cineol actually reduces what's called S1, which is the spike protein on the human cells. So by reducing that, the COVID infection couldn't access them. So
another thing I did see, speaking about eucalyptus as well, is actually, I think it was the UK, one of the armed forces in the UK, were using a citrodol spray, which that is gifted from lemon-scented gum or lemon eucalyptus as well.
Exactly
and
right.
They were using that. So obviously there's over 700 species of eucalyptus. They all have slightly different chemistry. But yeah, interesting with that.
Yeah. What did you ask me? Oh, yes.
Your mum.
So mum's book. This actually, you can get this on Amazon. It's called The Garden of Eden, but the one that's on Amazon was written in 2000 and excuse me, 14. Now the reason why that's relevant is some of them she updated, some of the oils. Tea tree wasn't one of them. So she said, oh, well, I'll tell you right the way through. I won't read the energetics at the top. She says, physical, it's a very fast evolving oil that knows it has a lot to do. Viruses, cuts, infections, invasion of organism, intestinal tract parasites. We never mentioned that. That's a good one. And sinus infections. Mental, it has a predisposition to self-advertisement. It's thought to draw its own publicity. The oil has evolved a 20th century personality and has been very in charge of its own instructing processes, very vibrant and efficient oil. And it definitely was like that, wasn't it? It was just everywhere in the 20th century. Well, so I should qualify that and say in the UK, we around about, I don't know, 1998, maybe 2000, 2001, they took all the essential oils off the pharmacy shelves. Up to that time, we had them on sale and they took them off. So it's a kind of drop down then. But spiritually, it says, still evolving into dealing with complex cellular structures, especially organisms which invade the skin. Viruses connected with radiation, and they can combat the effect of sunlight on the skin, evolving towards help with skin cancers. Knows a great deal about the effects of light, the effect of the speed of light and light carrying rays. It's developing its own strategy. So the reason why I left that now is because one of the key areas of research now into viruses is something called quorum sensing. And quorum sensing is basically how the bacteria in the body knows about the density of a cell and what it needs to do to multiply. And so this is kind of the intelligence, if you like, of a bacteria, of a virus. And so when you are looking at a clinical trial into how good a viricide or an antiviral, and the two are different, I'll qualify that in a minute, of an essential oil, you'll always see the quorum sensing. So virucidal is a bit like when Adam says he cleans down the surfaces of the kitchen. With tea tree, virucidal is what you do that will stop you catching a virus. An antiviral is it stops it spreading throughout your body, it stops it proliferating. So with looking at the core, the ability of something to quorum sense, you're able to say, well, this is how clever it will be, and how good is the essential oil at being able to overcome its cleverness. And of course, with tea tree, one of the things we're most interested in is on a small level, and again, I'll qualify that in a minute. On a small level, it's very good at dealing with things like MRSA and hospital viruses. And this was why in the 1990s, the world went mad in the labs, because we can deal with everything that goes on in a hospital, because look how good it works on all of those things. The problem was that they couldn't get it to replicate on a big enough scale to roll it out across the world as like a patented clinical drug. But on a small level, it will do that. So MRSA is antibiotic resistance, and there are so many of these things that are antibiotic resistant. And so essential oils are very good because, of course, nature keeps on evolving it and changing it slightly every year. And this is why you'll never be able to get like a patented medicine of an essential oil, because it can't be replicated year to year. It's slightly different wherever it grows and whatever. Now, from a pharmaceutical point of view, that's just awful, because it would be great if we could use them all of the time, but we can't. But from an aromatic point of view, that means that we keep our medicine, So tea tree does evolve, and one of the things that it is so clever at being able to do is to quorum sense. And what they now know is that bacteria quorum sense by light. And that's exactly what she said it was evolving to do. So the bacteria gauges what's happening on the light spectrum and is able to say, this is how much we need to spread or not. Presumably, and we don't really understand why, because it's daytime, so they're more active, so we can do more. It's nighttime, we can't, or maybe it's nighttime, they're not using their energy for so much, so move more. We don't really understand that, but what we do know is bacteria sense by how they're going to invade through the system through light.
Wow, interesting of the evolution, and how it was interesting also how your mum said that it likes what was it, self-promotion or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. And we used to say that a lot, we watched it, So this came through the year, so this was published the year Amy was born. So this will be 30 years old this year. So 2000, it was published 1993. And from around about 89, we were watching, what essential oils were doing. But it was about 1995 that it was like, it's everywhere. This is what you said it would do. And it was on every single shelf. It was fascinating to watch.
Wow, really interesting. And when we look at how, I think back to the Bundjalung people, when they were rubbing it on their skin for skin stuff, they were breathing it in for their lungs, and they were drinking it as well. They would also burn it, and they would use it as an energy cleanser for getting rid of things, unwanted energy. So a lot of the time, it's another example here of what would obviously infect our body and get at our boundaries kind of thing, our physical boundaries. Tea tree protects our physical boundary. It also helps our energetic boundaries as well. This is a really great one, especially for energetic vampires and that type of thing as well. And now, am I promoting that everyone in the Northern Hemisphere should start cleansing their space with tea tree? No, I'm not. But I think it would be interesting. A lot of the time, we all grab our smudge sticks, our sage smudge sticks. Now, white sage is obviously indigenous or native to California. Spanish sage, you can obviously get in Spain and that area and that type of thing. But what were your local people using on your land? And in the masterclass this month, we're going to do a bit of a dive into cleansing space, what to use, what not to use, and even some techniques and different things as well. So make sure if you haven't got your ticket for the masterclass, you do that. And in the description, we'll have the discount code as well. So use that. But tea tree can be a nice one for just a bit of a spritzer, I find. Putting it in some natural water, spritzing it around and helping to kind of, protect us from little things that might get us, but also big things that might get us, like that annoying woman at reception. Yeah,
I agree. So actually in the Northern Hemisphere, we would also, in the UK, I should say, we would also smudge with sage, but a different sage. So people go mad for white sage, which is actually, it's not a sage, it's an artemisia. But actually, traditionally here, we would use common sage or rosemary, or of course lavender, which everybody goes, oh yeah, of course, boring, but it's not boring. One other thing that I wanted to say, you talked about little things that might get you. So back in 2006, Dexter went to 2016. Dexter was at school in a knit-ridden school, and he was coming home with head lice every day. Now, actually, on Dexter's hair, it wasn't so bad, but on Andrew's hair, who is middle child, his hair is exactly the same colour as a head lice. So you would just go, I can't see him. You're all right. And then he'd be coming out with like millions of them. Oh, this is so awful. And when I was writing my free book, I decided to write some monographs. And what I came across was this clinical trial that talked about how tea tree and how nerolidol, which is a constituent of nerolina, can help head lice. So I became this person that nobody wanted to know until they got kids, and everybody, and it even happened last week, have you got any stuff? And I treated all of the infant schools right across our area, all on one day. So we had this huge thing. So I will tell you that if you expose knit eggs, because obviously knits are the eggs, aren't they? If you expose the eggs to tea tree for 40 minutes, half of the eggs die. So, I mean, that's profound, isn't it? It also, and I can't remember exactly what the time scale is, but I think it's about 20 minutes, the lice die. So, but nerolidol, which is in nerolina oil, was stronger than that. So we were like, right, I'll have some of that, I'll have some of that, and some of that. So I will tell everybody how I did it. So if you just, we went to Aldi, which is our local supermarket, and they had a normal mint and tea tree conditioner, but it could be anything, but obviously mint and tea tree work well. So then I poured out, I mean, I was buying everything they got on the shelf, and the woman was going, what are you doing? I'm getting rid of the nits right across the, like, pour them into a stacker box. And then I used a 1% dilution of tea tree, so that's low. 1% dilution of tea tree, 3% dilution of nerolina essential oil. And I can't even remember why I put jasmine in, but I did. There must have been a reason, but it was very, very low. It was something like 20 drops right across a stacker box. And then I put in a 3% dilution of lavender, just to stop people being stressed by the fact they've got it on their head, because it's quite a confusing thing for kids, isn't it? Stirred it all together, spent hours pouring it back into the bottle and getting it all down the side. And then we put them into tiny little shot glasses for every kid in the school. And we all treated the heads on the same day. On 1 week, we did it 4 days later, the next week, and we eradicated all the nits. So if anybody fancies doing that and needs some help, I am more than happy to tell you how to do a great big surge on nits.
Wow. And interesting that you use nerolina, which is a very lesser known Australian Melaleuca essential oil as well.
Yeah, I mean, I found the constituent, and this is quite often what I do. I found the constituent, I looked it up in Tisserand, in his safety data, went through and found the oil that had got the most of it in. Nerolina, never even heard of it, but I really like it. It's one of my favourite oils now, and it smells much nicer than tea tree, I think. And yeah, so great. So just if anybody decides to do it, make sure you comb all of the nits out, clean your knit comb in hot water, so dunk it so they're completely dead, and then make sure you wash all of the bed linen, hats, all of the stuff, hairbrushes, and do it all. So it's a great big thing. Do yourself as well.
Wow, thank you. That's really interesting, and a common problem. So it's great that we have essential oils for that. So on the energetics, is there any other? There's something else I want to share, but I thought I'd offer it over to you first. Is there anything else that you could see it would help with on the spiritual level?
like an uplifting kind of note, doesn't it? So if you've got like not negative thoughts, it wouldn't be the oil I'd turn to, but it is kind of refreshing and focusing. But no, not really. It just isn't in my spiritual, as you say, it's almost, I think, and this is the conclusion I came to with eucalyptus, it's like it's sealed to everyone outside the Australia, I think, like almost like a shamanic seal. I can't get past it at all.
Right. Well, let me take you on a slippery slide down into how I work with tea tree. So for me, obviously, tea tree has white blossoms to it. Although we don't get the oil from the blossoms, we get it from the leaves. So, you know, the idea that white blossoming plants have a connection to the moon. Quite interesting that most of the eucalyptuses also do have white blossoms as well. So you've got these kind of spiritual oils in this way. But I find tea tree works really well with the heart chakra. Now, I was blessed to many moons ago train in tarot with a psychotherapist, and she would actually use tarot in her her sessions with her clients because she found that you know, instead of just going, well, what's wrong, when you put the cards out and go, well, the cards are suggesting maybe there's a relationship issue or you're not looking after yourself, you'd kind of go straight in by asking that, and she found her sessions were far more effective this way. So she explained this phenomenon that happens to us when we're as children. So when, you know, first few months of our lives, we see our mother, mainly, for want of a better term, as God, the all provider. Because there we are in our crib, you know, she gives us comfort, she gives us milk, she gives us everything. So if the baby perceives in that time that there is something wrong with that relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean you had a bad mother. Maybe the room was too cold. Mum could have problems with her milk supply, or, you know, mum didn't just come running every time that you cried and you're a bit of a needy baby. The baby kind of comes to this rationale conclusion that, well, there can't be anything wrong with mum because she's God, she's the all providing. If I'm not getting what I need, what I'm asking for, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm undeserving. And we as infants in the first few months of our lives start to learn as we're trying to comprehend this big wide world, I'm not worthy of certain things. Now, you may be listening to this at the moment going, well, I have no friggin' idea what I was thinking when I was 1 month old. But how that can play out in our later life is doing things where we don't feel worthy. So it can be that we find ourselves constantly in relationships where we're giving more than we're receiving. We're trying to earn love. Or we may find in abundance, we just have problems with money all the time, and we just don't feel, you know, that we don't have that value to value our time, value our energy, and we always end up being underpaid and giving out more money than we're earning. And sometimes it can be neglecting our own health, whether we, in doing something for everyone else, we're running around and making ourselves ragged, or we just don't prioritize that it's important to look after ourselves because we thought that might not be it. Now, where I love tea tree is we know that tea tree is a really great cleanser. She cleanses anything around issues to do with mothering and helps us get back. We talk a lot about the inner child, but recently I've been, you know, doing some work and reading about other people's work with the inner mother. How is our inner mother? And tea tree is a really great equalizer, cleanser of that old scripting, and can help you to come back to mothering yourself and nurturing yourself and valuing yourself in that way. And so it works really, really beautifully with the heart chakra, not so much with this romantic love. It's not what I'd be using in love blends, but it's really great in that exchange of value. And interesting, we were talking before about the skin being so important. The skin is obviously a boundary. Having those boundaries between what I allow into my life and what I don't allow into my life, and helping us to recalibrate and rebalance that. So that's my favorite way to use tea tree, and I think that's where it can be plonked right in the middle of the spiritual forum of going, well, we've all got mothering issues in some way, not that we necessarily all had bad mothers, but in the way that we mother ourselves and the way that we even, you know, in a masculine dominated world, how we feel about that divine feminine or that divine mother figure or that type of archetype, there's need for many of us to have great healing. And for me, yeah, Merv's great. And there's some other ones that will step in for other parts, but tea tree is a real cleanser and recalibrator in that context.
That's really fascinating. I wouldn't have thought of using it that way at all. What I would say, it is the oil that I use or suggest to women if they're breastfeeding and they get cracked nipples. So that would stop you being able to feed. So, but that's the only kind of link I could say, oh yes, I can feel that, or that resonates with me. And that's, and I genuinely am not saying that because I think you're wrong, because I think it probably is right, but I don't feel I don't feel here a psychic connection at all to those kind of Australian oils. So it's very odd, isn't it?
It is.
Interesting. So that would be really interesting actually this week when people comment. Put this in the comments. How are you feeling about what he said? Or let's even try it. See if we can do some work around it and do some experiments. Because I think that these indigenous medicines often talk to people differently than to outsiders.
Very much so. And when you do comment as well, we will ask, please say, yes, that resonated, no, that didn't, but also let us know which country you're in. So it'll be really interesting to see if the Australians are going, yeah, I get that, but then you've got a whole bunch of people, throughout Europe, America, Asia, going, no, I don't get that type of thing. So if you had to pick, if I made you pick a chakra for tea tree, what would you pick? Do you feel?
I think I probably would pick the root chakra, but it's not even something I would say that I'd use it as a chakra medicine. And the only reason I would say that actually does completely lock into what you were saying about like those first few years, you develop a safety mechanism, don't you? And so how safe you feel in the world reflects your defense mechanisms. And I use it as a natural defense,
Yeah.
I mean, that's like spinning it and spinning it and spinning it. To me, I would say, no, I don't think I would use it as a chakra oil.
Got you. One other thing that can be in this exchange of value, tea tree is also, I've found really helpful for when we are in those parts of our life where nothing seems to be working well for us. So, we seem to be basically, as Australians say, we're pushing shit uphill. Do you know what I mean? Nothing's working for us. It's a really nice one for helping us take a check back. And tea tree can help us realize that there is a time for action and there's a time for pause, and to work back with the ebb and flow of the seasons of the year, the seasons of life, and that type of thing, and know when to act and when to pause. And so if you're kind of if you're meditating on like, when should I propose to my partner? When should I, quit my job? All those kind of timing things. Tea tree is can be used for that as well, and has been used, and people find that gives that real clarity of like, okay, it's best to wait. So if you are someone who tends to jump in a lot, those that have a lot of Leo energy that act now, think later, or those that have Aquarian energy that are think now, think a bit more, oh, it's gone, and never act. To balance that out, tea tree might be really nice in that context as well.
Yeah, and the other thing is that because I learn oils through themes, so I will say, well, you label yours through themes, I've noticed. It's odd that we both do it because I don't think many people do that. But my theme is infection. And I do get infected by other people's moods, thought process. So for a lot of the time I'll disappear and people will go, I wonder if she's all right. And it's just I can't deal with other people anymore. Can't deal with your thought processes, and I disappear. So I think if you are infected by like other people's auras or that sort of stuff, then in fact I do use it like that. Spray it around me if somebody's aura is keep encroaching, or I can feel that they're like infecting me with their negativity, So actually there is an aspect there, isn't there?
Yeah.
So yeah, natural defense again, isn't it?
Yeah. And not that I'm trying to win points for my heart chakra argument, but I'm going to throw one in here. When we think about the heart chakra, a lot of time people think it's about love. Am I getting love? Am I receiving love? I like to extend that a bit more. It's about love, but it's also about value. Is there equal give and take? And obviously in those situations where you feel that someone is draining you on that vampiric kind of energy or empathetic level and that type of thing, this is where tea tree again can be a bit like it protects our physical barrier. It can stop with that kind of draining of the heart or those relationships where there's more take than give, and helping us to, again, balance our heart chakra so that we are giving. So maybe if I give enough, people will love me, which can be a common theme, and recalibrating all that as well.
But actually, you miss the most obvious argument for the heart chakra. It is a lungs medicine. That's heart. So all of that physical stuff where it sits here and you have problems with like expressing yourself and you get coughs or all of that stuff, all of that's heart chakra because it's lungs.
Yeah, got you. Yeah. You don't normally put the lungs with the throat chakra?
No.
No. Yeah, just in that area of the chest. Yeah, awesome. Beautiful. I love that. Cool. Well, hopefully we've opened people's minds up a little bit to tea tree. I think there's, whether we've just given you an amazing knit recipe, and people are now probably frantically Googling Nerolina. I didn't know Nerolina would be on your list of things. We might have to do an episode on Nerolina because
Please don't, because outside of this,
that.
I'm stuck. But my bottle's about that big. It's huge of Nerolina. I get through tons of it.
But I guess we should say when it comes to the Melaleuca family, it's worth noting that honey myrtle, although named a myrtle, is part of the Melaleuca family as well. I think it's the one with the most geranol in it. So is it geranol that gives it the
geraniol, yeah.
Geraniol,
yes,
yeah.
But I'd have to check that. But yes, agreed. And like I say, right at the beginning, for my tooth abscess, I use eucalyptus and honey myrtle together. I use honey myrtle loads. I love it. Very good antibiotic oil.
Yeah, the Melaleuca family, we could do several episodes on that. There's Nioli, which is a bit of a more gentle kind of tea tree. There's Rosalina, which is sometimes nicknamed lavender tea tree, and it's actually my favorite oil to diffuse in the bedroom at night because of both those lavender aspects and the tea tree aspects to it. Nerolina is beautiful. Honey myrtle. We could do a whole month in Melaleucas, but we won't. Is there any? We'll scatter them through.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, to help anybody that's learning, I think one of the hardest things I found when I was learning is to learn the Latin names. And I learned the Latin name to this wrongly. So I often will say Melaleuca. And then my brain goes, oh, that's how you spell it. And it was only when it was explained to me what the Latin name meant that I was like, that my brain went, oh, okay, I can do this now. So Luca means white. Mela means black. Black leaves against the white trunk. That's right, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
So that's what it means. So the leaves are very dark, and so when they turn in the wind, they look black against the Luca of the white bark. So when I learned that, I was like, okay, now I know what it is. I can write it. So if anybody if that might be useful to somebody.
I must admit, I don't know a lot of Latin, and I learn Latin names, but each time I learn what a Latin name means, it opens up a whole new, context. The Picea Mariana, and for black spruce being a reference to Mother Mary, Arbor Vitae meaning tree of life. There's a lot just in the Latin name. So maybe I need to, in my spare time, dive into learn a bit of Latin. I
always look what does that mean? What did Linnaeus see it? Because it's usually Linnaeus that classified it in around about 1800s, but you can go back earlier, and the earlier names tend to be Greek. So to help you with that, but yes, I love Latin names.
Yeah, to go off on a total tangent, one thing I did see last night is the Latin name for blue cornflower is very I can't remember what it was, but it was chironic in its it was a reference to chiron directly. Obviously it doesn't produce an essential oil, but apparently it has a reference to chiron.
So that's a rabbit hole to go down, isn't it? Who saw that and why?
Exactly. We'll have to explore that in another time. Well, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. If you were seeking, knit, you've got more questions about knits, you want to know about certain skin issues. So many people have different skin issues. Well, how are you going to ask those questions? You can join us on a masterclass on the 24th of this month. The links are in all the show notes below and the discount code as well, because if you listen to us, well, then we're going to give you a discount because we're that kind of people. Next week, we'll see you for another episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Take care.
Bye-bye.